radio psychic Dr. Linda Salvin, along with Candy Finnegan from the Emmy award-winning television show Intervention. Candy brings her more than 30 years of experience dealing with all areas of recovery. Listen as Candy and Dr. Linda bring expert guests into the conversation to bring your recovery to the next level. Together, they bring you the tools and techniques that bring balance and serenity to your life. For nearly 30 years as a syndicated talk show host and metaphysical clinician, Dr. Linda has helped thousands of people worldwide solve problems on the air and in person with her insights and solutions. So pull up a chair, turn it up, and get ready for a visit with the one and only Dr. Linda. And now, live from Los Angeles, ladies and gentlemen, Dr. Linda Salvin.
Hi, everybody, and welcome back to another episode. Hi, Candy Finnegan. Excuse me. Had a little power outage. I got a frog in my throat. This is great. It's another session of Recovery Wednesday, and what we're going to be discussing today, Candy Finnegan and me, Dr. Linda Salvin, is what happens after you leave a recovery center. What if you go in for recovery for some addiction or problem that you're dealing with, which is a controlled environment and can be very safe, and you make friends, and all of a sudden it's like your time to, quote, graduate, and you're back out in the world. It gets scary, and there's vulnerability, and there's tools that are needed, and a lot of people freak out and relapse and end up back in rehab, or other people look. Thanks, Karina. Karina's calling in from Chicago. The opportunities to grow are varied out there. Candy's the specialist. Candy's been doing interventions and working in mental health and working with families for 30 years or more. And I come in at the spiritual level as a psychic healer and a medium, and I still work with addiction in my private practice. We both are available to you should you want to consult with either one of us. All the details on how to contact us will be at the end of the show. But Candy, hi, it's good to see you today. How are you?
I'm doing really good. Thanks, Linda.
You're welcome, Candy. Candy and I go back over 35 years. We have a long history of friendship and life's experiences. And this is a real important week for her, for certain things in her life. And it is for everybody. We're all going through a lot of change. But right now, I want to focus on you, who's listening or watching this show on one of the 100 platforms out there, wherever you find us. And maybe you know somebody in your family that has an addiction or doesn't know how to stop drinking, stop compulsive eating, stop snorting coke, stop smoking dope, stop promiscuous sex, stop shopping, stop gambling. There's always something, even on their phones. We can obsess on the phone. I do. I get hooked on the dopamine fix, and I scroll looking at nothing or the same thing all the time, thinking something's going to change, but it's really getting some type of fix. And they created the phones to give us that kind of high, like you might get off of a drug. So on the other side, maybe I have to go into rehab and detox on my phone. I don't know.
Well, oddly enough, Dr. Don Grant is an expert on social media.
Really?
And it's very true.
It's hard.
I think it really started during the COVID epidemic because everyone was alone and life became Zoom meetings and FaceTime. And I think that it's become a real problem with teenagers because they weren't really able to interact or go to school, and they became very in tune to life.
Could you imagine? I mean, you and I are much older, but to be in that generation from a few years ago, you go through grammar school all the way up to high school, and your graduation's on Zoom, or college after all those years, or your wedding, or a huge birthday party that had been planned, your 16th, your 21st, your anniversary. Not just school, but our lives in general were all disruptive. Karina had to teach Zoom. I know my neighbor across the street has twins, and at the time they were 7, and she was going crazy with all the books and trying to get online. And what was your experience as a helper and a counselor, Candy? Because you probably had even more difficulties, because we know alcoholism, child abuse, domestic violence, drug abuse, the rates went up because of the
Well, and relapse. Relapse was just tremendous among sober people because there was no interaction. There were no 12-step meetings. There was only you and a little screen. And I think people felt very lonely and very desperate. And a lot of people picked up drugs and alcohol because, believe you me, in California, none of the pot shops closed. And
no, they did not.
None of the liquor store closed. And so delivery became a way of life. And, I, as a, professional interventionist for many, many years, over 30, you can't really do an intervention over Zoom. It's a very personal, very spiritual, very intuitive process. And it just doesn't work over a little screen. So I did a lot of placement. I did a lot of family counseling. I did a lot of encouraging people to get help. And by the grace of God, rehabs had really high situations where you could get in. You were in, by yourself for, 48 hours while they tested you for COVID. And, it was a mess, but there was still recovery available if that's something you wanted.
Well, you've been involved with the recovery community for many, many years. People will probably recognize you from the TV show Intervention, what you spent 10 years on that show, and you were traveling all over the country helping people. Before we go into life after recovery, which is really one of the topics today, set up an intervention. Okay, I'm going to call you from Arkansas, and I have a brother who is addicted to cocaine. And the family doesn't know what to do, and he's losing weight, and he's spending money and stealing things. And we reach out to you for help. Well, as you're the professional, what happens when somebody comes to you and needs help with an individual if they can't help?
Well, I think I talked to the primary person that has reached out for help. And a great deal of time, it might be a sister or even a sister-in-law. I certainly had children reach out to me that were older in their teens about their mother or father. And I, have them talk to me about what life looks like living with them. And then we go from there, and I ask who would want to be involved in it. And, if insurance or private pay. Unfortunately, interventions are not covered by insurance. And so there are interventionists who charge $22,000. By the way, it's not me.
No, you're very reasonable and you're honorable. A lot of people, they overcharge.
Oh my God, yes, and they're not qualified. There's a lot of intervention specialists that do training for 3 to 4 days. I did training for years and years and years, just like you. I mean, this isn't a wham bam situation, No,
and both of us deal with people's lives. So we do the best we can to give the best advice or guidance, depending on which tool we're trained to use for each situation. But when you're dealing with addiction, and it's also the family disease, because everybody's involved.
It is so a family disease. And I've run into certainly families that were sicker than the addict.
Well, they're very dysfunctional or in denial or fearful or blame.
Codependent, because what happens with an addictive family is they know how the person's going to act. They know what to expect. They know at 11 o'clock they pass out and they come to at 2 o'clock and need more alcohol. And it just goes on. And when you've had enough, and as you know, I wrote a book called When Enough is Enough. And it's a very...
do you have it by you that you can show on screen?
Roll right over here.
Go get the book.
It's like a situation where it's really important to do it right, because you can do damage doing it wrong, oddly enough. Here's the
People
book.
don't understand that. There's your book, When Enough is Enough by Candy Finnegan. I remember when she was writing it with her brother-in-law many years ago,
Yep.
locked herself up in the house for several months, and that thing got out quickly.
Yeah.
But it's more factual and educational, instructional, as
Exactly.
opposed to like
It
a
is not stories.
story. No, it's not story.
But then before you do anything, you get the insurance checked, or we find the right treatment center, and that has a lot to do with my expertise on resources.
So each center might focus or specialize in a certain area, like some for more drugs than alcohol, or eating disorders, or sexual abuse, or whatever the problem is, or the addiction, or the.
And, I have relationships. A lot of people take kickback money to place somebody in a treatment center. It's against all my licensing, my ethical code. I have a long-standing rapport with people at treatment centers. And you have to get that all set up before you ever intervene, because once you intervene, you have about 4 to 5 hours before they'll change their mind. You don't intervene on Wednesday and tell them they can go on Saturday.
No, because it's now or never.
Overdose.
Yeah, even like on the show where you would watch people resist getting into the van and then surrender. Next thing you know, you're on the plane, they're in treatment. And then when people go through treatment, there's a detox, there's therapies, there's a lot of work on the person and the people and the family. So they go through usually, a 30-day program or something?
Well, that's standard now. With the show, I insisted they get 90 days. I think then you've got, you kind of defrost, which is detox.
Yeah, but you've got a foundation.
The recipe, which is treatment. And then you kind of learn how to make it and pass it out. And so because of that, I think 90 days is reasonable. Most insurance companies, honest to God, usually are good for 14 to 17 days. So it's not fair. I mean,
no, it's not fair at all, but that's insurance. We pay out the nose for our premiums, and when we really need something, they're not always there to accommodate us, whether it's medication or certain treatments or certain ailments. I mean, that's a whole nother show we can get into. So you're working with the people, and you personally let them get.
Yeah, my first step is a pre-intervention, and hopefully it's done in person. I have done Zoom because in situations there were people all over the country that weren't able to get to the intervention, and I do interventions only in person. And I might have a laptop there that has the people on it that weren't able to come to the intervention in person. And I spend between 3 and 4 hours at a pre-intervention meeting, and we go through everything. It's a fine act play, I always say. And if the person runs, who's going to run after him? If the person starts arguing, we don't argue with them. We've heard their voice, and it isn't working. And then usually, sometimes if I do the pre-intervention in the morning, I'll do the intervention in the afternoon, be on a plane that evening. Uh-huh. Or the next day, depending on the drug. I would just assume they've had some sleep if possible. And a lot of times it isn't, depending on the drug. And I intervene on them, but I actually don't. I have trained this family by statements, not letters, and of how this has affected their life, how this has affected the person, the addict, alcoholic's life, or the dependent person. And we go down the list, and to have a really successful one, there always has to be a consequence for their behavior, or the consequence for them not going into treatment.
You just had me think of something. I never asked you this. As many times as Candy and I have talked or gone out to dinner and shared our days with our clients, and what about this, and this one did that and said this, and it's exhausting. And both of us take on the responsibility of helping people, but we're also human, and sometimes it's just exhausting or it's overwhelming. But Candy, in your situation, have you ever been with a family and you're there for the mother, but all of a sudden one of the kids wakes up and admits that they too have a problem? Does somebody ever come forward to say, I need help too, where they kind of realize it's not just about them or her or him, but they too identify, and then it becomes more out in the open that there's another addict or troubled person?
I've done a lot of,
I've
only done 2 or 3 people interventions.
That's a lot.
In one family, but I've done a lot of 2 people, and it usually comes out in the pre-intervention. I don't allow anybody to come in and drink. I've had one intervention where they were having mimosa, but other than that, I asked that they not have anything to drink. In the old days, of course, I always took smoke breaks because people were so nervous. But yeah, many times they always say, well, you can talk about mom, but what about you? You get high every day. And I listen very closely. And if that's the case, I usually meet with the family beforehand, the actual intervention. And many times I've said, okay, what are we going to do about Johnny? And they go, well, he needs help too. And as fast as I can, I try to get placement for him. And as soon as the one is done, the intervention, I turn right back around and do another one. I don't join them because everybody's intervention is a personal situation.
Right.
And so
is recovery.
Yeah. It's in some situations, it's been absolutely miraculous that the whole family can get into recovery. Yep.
So you're in recovery or you're in treatment, and not all are 12-step. If people don't know what 12-step is, it's a form of recovery that that has a spiritual foundation that's been very effective. There's other therapies and recovery centers that have their own technique psychologically and with pharmaceutically trained therapists or whatever. Everybody's got their own type of protocol. So you may go in for 2 weeks or 30 days or 90 days.
Let's do 30 to 45
on the average. So
with detox, yeah.
So you're getting comfortable and you're starting to get some clarity, and then the guilt or the shame or, oh my God, the excitement. I want to get back into life and I feel bad what I did with my boyfriend, or I shouldn't have stolen that. And all the emotions come up. But now it's time, Linda, you've been here long enough. You got to get back out to real life. Well, I'm afraid to go to my apartment. So there's sober living houses. There's halfway places. If I don't want to go to my family or my own home or stay with a friend that's not going to understand, where do a lot of these people transition to in a safe place? So let's explain the sober living houses.
Let me give you an example. So if I send somebody, let's say, to the Betty Ford Center, they have, right after treatment, you would go into their sober living. They call it extended care, and it's on the premise, and they live there, and it is not so restrictive. You can have your phone. It isn't as diligent, but it still keeps you into your recovery. One of the things that is so important in new recovery is learning how to live without this substance or this dependence, and gain community. You and I both know, Linda, that community and being around people who have the same thing kind of wrong with them that you do is very comforting. And many years ago, there were a few, very few good sober livings. And but anymore, the different treatment centers that I work closely with have a place that is recommended for you to go to. I would say if you were a mother of 4 and you had to get back to being that mother, and it's more difficult. But younger people, I think it's essential they go into sober living. I always recommend going into sober living near where your treatment center is, because you still have that same connection. You might,
or if they have a problem, they've got somebody else to talk to on a higher level than just
and
in the
there's
house,
somebody
right?
there
So
up
there's safety.
24/7, and you go to 12-step meetings several times a day. Some of them for younger people offer a college track where you can go to college, come back. You're in a very safe environment. There are probably 50, I think it's 56 colleges that have a recovery component to their.
It's all changed.
Yeah, it's called, college rehabilitation, or, college rehab. You can attend college and you're with other sober people, and they have meetings and support. So all of a sudden.
It's interesting. You just reminded me, I want to interrupt you. If you probably remember in 1988 or 89, my background's health education, and I was hired by Cal State Northridge, our local university here, to establish and develop the drug abuse program on campus.
Yeah.
And I did that and put meetings on campus, and it grew. And my job was also to go to the dorms and the sororities,
Right.
and the football and athletic teams, and the largest cocaine addicted population was the athletic department.
Oh,
Believe it or
absolutely,
not.
because if you get hurt, they will give you what you need to get back on there.
To get out and play. All the addicts. I was shocked when I spoke to some of the people I remember back then, but it was huge. They didn't want to hear recovery or abuse.
Well,
or
the coaches
they didn't
want to hear.
No, they don't want to hear it. You can help somebody. No, some of the students, but you're right. And that's, 30 years ago or more. So you can see how all of this has evolved, folks, because even though getting sober has been around for over 75 years, people have admitted to having problems, but the program started, and then in the 80s and 90s, the recovery centers, I guess, or hospitals, whatever you want to call them, started to evolve more and more. Then it became, in my opinion, in some areas, which is where Candy was alluding, where it's like payola, it became more of the business and making money rather than taking care of the person that needs the help. And that's like with a lot of companies out there, they forget the human factor as to why they started to do what they're doing. But you can always trust Candy Finnegan. You can always know that she would be there. If you have family problems or your own problem with some type of an addiction, you want to contact Candy Finnegan. Give out your email address, Candy.
It's Candy Finnegan. It's CandyFinnigan@AOL. And these collegiate recovery programs are at UCLA. USC has what they call Haven House, and it's a whole floor in a dorm that is in recovery. And it's just more support so you can be successful. A lot of kids have to drop out of college because they aren't making their grades. And, you walk into a collegiate situation and you've never been away from home. I remember my own daughter, had never been around alcohol because her father and I were both sober, and all of a sudden she's put in the mix in a strange state. It was actually Kansas, where I'm from, but it was a situation where she really didn't know. She was in a sorority, drinking.
Who's this? I'm sorry, who was this?
Bridget.
Oh, Bridget, your daughters. Yeah.
Yeah. Right. And so, they'd all go to bars, and, she hadn't been around alcohol, and here she was 18. And it's very enticing. I remember I went to the sorority mother and daughter weekend, and when the bartender knew her name, I thought, oh God, here we go again. I thought, this is not so good. And I think she, at some point, got to the situation where she was drinking too much, but she understood it because she'd been educated by us, and she knew that we belonged to 12-step programs, and she caught herself, because and I think pot is just like an everyday occurrence there, as is Adderall. That's one of the main drugs that they prescribe in the infirmaries and the universities. They don't test you for being ADHD. You just say, I can't concentrate, and they go, here you go. So I think There's abuse, certainly, in most colleges. Now, there are 3 separate colleges. I think one's Brunswick, and the other one, I can't remember the name of it. It's in Minnesota. But it is a sober college.
Really?
And
Wow.
it is for kids who have gotten out of rehab and still need the structure.
Oh, that's wonderful.
Yeah, I mean, it's like, this is a lifelong commitment. This isn't a 20-minute commitment. I always, try to scare parents to death about having them go to rehab in the summer and then right back into school in September, because they're not prepared, and make sure that they do go someplace that has recovery on the campus. I think almost all universities, state, have 12-step meetings.
No, they do.
You need that support, because a bad day, a bad grade, a good grade, any excuse there is, let's go out. And there's a tremendous amount of peer pressure.
That's going to set somebody up to drink or use or
because
abuse.
They won't fit in. Well, if you're with a group of people who are in the same situation that you are, then you have that community and that support.
Right. No, I remember growing up, and I was always intimidated by them, thinking they had it all together. They were the cool kids. They were the smart kids. They were the pretty kids or whatever. But I didn't fit in. So as I got older, I think the first thing, I was put on diet pills at age 13 so I could be thin by 9th grade. But then came cigarettes. And I think it was at junior high graduation in 68. They were all smoking cigarettes, and a teacher was handing out cigarettes. And that was where I had my first cigarette, because I wanted to be part of, hey, I was at this cool party. I normally didn't go to these little parties, but now at graduation, I'm part. And I started smoking, and then one thing led to another by the time I got into that summer and then high school. And yes, most of it, not all, is peer pressure or a lack of self-worth and self-esteem or identity, or there was abuse at home, or there were conflicts or grades. I'm sorry?
An older sibling.
And
said, hey, try this. And if you try this, then you're not going to rat me out to my mom and dad.
That too. I tried to get one of my sisters, to smoke when I was like 19. She came to visit me when I was away at school, and she never did. She has her other issues or addictions or whatever. But I did. I tried to say, I'll just take one, because our mother smoked. So I smoked. You see it. But I mean, I'm not smoking now for 23 years. I think it is 22, 23 years. But we talked about this before. And for those that are listening for the first time, smoking cigarettes and then trying to stop can be more difficult and painful in a withdrawal than heroin.
Well, I think it's a longer one.
Withdrawal?
Yeah, just because it might not take very long to get out of your system. But hiding behind that smoke
and the hand to the mouth,
particularly in rehab, it's the place that's social. Some places are not allowing you to smoke anymore, but you can vape. And we're going to do a whole show on vaping.
Yeah, we are. We touched on that once before, and the chemicals are killing the lung tissue.
Yeah, and it's so addicting.
And the chemicals, it's replacing one for another, thinking it's going to be safer than nicotine, and it's not. No. You're still hurting your lungs. And like I said before, when my mom died of lung cancer, my aunt died of lung cancer, so I watch my lungs every year. And now that I'm smoking for 22 years, it takes 18 years for the lung tissue to totally rehabilitate, so it's as if I've never smoked. And I'm very conscious, and I get out of the way if I'm around somebody who's smoking. I don't want to inhale that secondhand smoke. I smell it, I feel it, and I got to get away from that film. Yeah, that little smoke screen. No more.
But the interesting thing is that I know people who say they don't smoke anymore. It's been 2 years since they had a cigarette, but they vape like crazy.
Because it's still, they got to have that long.
Well, it's the nicotine.
Inhaling the nicotine is the addictive drug.
It's such a high level. If you've been vaping for, let's say, 6 months or 7 months, you're up to probably enough nicotine that would be in 2 to 2.5 packs of cigarettes.
Wow, and they don't know that. And then you were saying before certain flavors have been discontinued. Is that because of the toxicity levels they were finding?
No, that's because of them marketing to young people.
Oh, yeah. So here's bubble gum or strawberry. So
and mango.
It tastes good.
And the other thing is, in the state of California, you can no longer buy menthol.
And that's because it's so strong. I know they're putting menthol in the packs to get the menthol flavor and feeling.
Mm-hmm. So you can, on a good day, find somebody who's selling menthol cigarettes at a jacked up price. But
right.
It was for our good, but there's always a way around it.
Always, regardless of what the substance is. Like we came up in the 60s, 70s, and during those years, it was very acceptable to be smoking, drinking. It was social. It was the hippie days. It was the disco days. I mean, we partied in a different way. But as like being in school during that time, I took a class called Alcohol, Tobacco, and Drugs, and they were educating the educator on how to eliminate the problem out in society, which is slowly catching on. And still, it's an individual decision, or sometimes people hit their bottom, as they say, regardless of whatever the substance is, right? So you can educate and you can hear it 1,000 times, but until you feel it for yourself is where it hits home. We know a couple of people that, I mean, I know Candy's worked for hours and days and weeks with certain people, and they won't help themselves, no matter.
They want us to do the work. And as you well know, hours and years that you spend on the phone trying to help people. If love or God could get anybody sober or well with mental illness or any dependence, then, they could call me and I'd get them well in an hour. But the truth of it is that it's an inside job. Nobody, I always say, if you've been praying for a family, he sent me. I'm the one that can help get them back to themselves. But this starts now at 13, 14 years old, is when these kids start going and getting a bunch of over-the-counter drugs. I had a 14-year-old that was so addicted to different types of antihistamines. And I mean, anything for a high. There's called a fishbowl party, where you bring prescription drugs from your family.
You just throw something in the bowl and you take something blindly, not knowing what it is. We talked about that, right?
It's a very
or aerosols. There's the aerosol thing.
Oh. Yes, the computer cleaner that is the compressed air is pure nitrous and nitrous oxide, and boy, it can scramble you. I did 2 of those on the show, and it was frightening.
I remember one of the shows where somebody walked around with a canister. I don't know what
it was computer air compression.
Is that what that was? I mean, it was like, if this was it, there was not a scene without it. And if it dried up or didn't have anything left, there was another one right there.
Well, you could go to Staples or Home, any of those things, and get it by the case. So there were restrictions put on that. In the old days, it was huffing, and it was
huffing, right.
glue that you put model airplanes together. We will do anything
to escape,
not feel. And some are much more dangerous than others.
I agree. What about fentanyl? How are you doing with the fentanyl crisis?
Oh, God.
You have a lot of people?
That's about 5 shows, Linda. Heroin addiction is down 60% because
fentanyl's up.
Fentanyl. Well, people are just doing fentanyl. If you know you're buying fentanyl, then you have a lot easier way of managing it than you do if you buy heroin and it's cut with it. So fentanyl is a drug of choice now.
And it's still Russian roulette, because one person can take 1 or 2 and be fine and keep going, and the other dies, overdoses. That's it.
Everything. Cocaine is being cut with it.
You never know.
Weed is now being cut with it. And it is, I don't want to get in trouble with the cartel because,
No, we got to watch what we're saying.
But you know, most of it is not coming from China anymore. It's coming from Mexico.
We just had somebody pop up on the screen. If you want to bring her back, Rebel, somebody said this is fascinating. So I'm glad we're touching somebody. Hi, Deborah. I'm glad. Feel free to enter the chat or ask a question, and Candy or I will be happy to respond. And if you know somebody who've had experience, that's what the show is for. And we're going to be here every Wednesday, 1 p.m. Pacific, 4 p.m. Eastern. We're live, and then of course it goes into the archives on all the different platforms. So feel free to share it or question us or whatever, or contact us off the air with all the information you'll see at the end. But fentanyl, I had a client earlier this year or last year, I can't remember the exact time, and her son had been in and out of jail with fentanyl addiction, and I tried to explain what could be done to help her, but she was more concerned about making money, going back to work. I said, you want to work and you want a vacation, but you're not ready or willing to invest in healing your son. He may not have another day. He may not survive.
It takes 18 seconds.
You never know, but he's always in jail. I said, why doesn't he want to get well? Now, you and I know somebody who's a celebrity. I'm not going to mention their name, but went through many, many what is called relapses, where you get sober or off the drug or alcohol or whatever the thing is, and then they relapse where they can get back into it. And I remember one time he used to say, if I was so willing to die, why am I not willing to live? And when you turn it around, folks, it's like, why? And that's where he had the light bulb, where he finally got it. And then
we're talking about the same person. 35 rehabs he went to.
Yep. Yep. And he had time and time again, but he's got over 30 years without drugs and alcohol now, which is great. And like everybody else, people think if you get sober, oh my God, I can't go to the bars, I can't have fun, I'm not going to get to party. There's actually more fun because you're awake and you're alert and you're aware. And then you see all these people hung over at the bar going, this is not attractive.
Well, being an alcoholic and an addict is a full-time job.
It is. You got to work at finding your next fix. Or where am I going to get cigarettes? Or do I have enough money? We always had enough money to buy another pack of cigarettes, regardless how much they were. You always have enough money or the connection to find the drug if you really, really want it. It's constantly planning or going to the ATM. And there was always a job. You're right.
Well, and I want to bring up one thing about younger people too. You know, if you had a child and they were an addict, or they had severe emotional and mental problems, they always get all the attention. And you might have other kids and they could be straight A students and on their way to Yale or, you know, Harvard, and you don't worry about them. But there's such a repercussion for those kids. It's such a trauma for them that only person that really gets attention is the sick kid. And so a lot of times when they go into rehab and they get well and they come out and they think, well, then we don't have anything to worry about. They slide right back in because they're not getting the attention that they so crave because they've been the designated, you know, addict mentally.
Or like the hero is always rescuing. And then there's those that are trying to compete. Or even in my own situation, and I don't mind exposing something in my own family with my own process where, I mean, I was in a plane crash. I was hit by a fire truck. I had a white light experience. I got sober. I mean, I had a lot of outside trauma on top of dealing with my own stuff. But I think after, not just in my situation, but I'm using me as an example, when you get into the healing and you become more self-sufficient or less dependent or less needy or less whatever, I think part of the family sometimes gets scared or friends get scared. I have seen people leave my world.
Fracture,
because my voice got stronger. That happens, right?
Yeah. We don't know what well looks like because recovery is a lifelong process. It's not a 30-day fix.
No.
But I do believe in the older generation now, there are many, many treatment centers. There are a few really good ones that treat older people because of grief. You start drinking more because your aches and pains, you get hooked on opiate pills. And you've never had addiction or alcoholic tendencies or behaviors.
Well, you've got the celebrities on the road all the time, and it calmed down some of their anxieties or exhaustion.
Pills, pills, pills. And, you cross that invisible line, as we say, you still have to get help. You cannot just go off these drugs. Alcohol is one of the highest rates of a very dangerous detox, because after 72 hours, you start having tremors, and a lot of times, if you're older, you have seizures. And once you have that detox seizure, very tough to get back. So you drink again. And there's always a reason, and sometimes you can stop, but you can't stay stopped.
Mm-hmm.
And that's
where support comes in.
Yeah.
Where if you feel like you're going to go off the edge or take a drink or eat something or whatever, you've got someone to reach out to, like, hey, I feel this, or this just happened and I really want to eat or binge or drink or get loaded or smoke or whatever. Somebody can say, no, you don't have to do that.
You don't have to live like that today.
Right. And then they still have the choice, because I just went through this with somebody about a week and a half ago, where I said, no, you don't have to. And then I called to see how she was doing. No, she already relapsed. It's like, okay, you can be of service and help, but it's still the individual's decision on what to do. And sometimes the mind will play tricks on us, folks, that we think we know what we're doing, but it may call. And you give into that. It's like somebody was saying, like the devil and the angel within us. We have the black and the white, and it's learning to recognize the voices, but also having tools, which goes back to being in recovery, which you get in a hospital or recovery situation. You're taught life tools. Then with the recovery house or the sober living, when you're out of 90 days or whatever, and then you're with other people, adjustment. There's the adjustment phase. And then you still have tools. So when you're back on your own or getting a job or getting a new home or getting your car back or making money, it's not easy. It looks easy. Yeah. It looks like the whole world has it together. And everybody struggles with something. Just like Candy always says, we're all recovering from something. Life isn't
perfect. And, I believe that addiction and any form of it, and I include alcohol, is a brain disease, and you cross that invisible line and it takes over your life. And no matter how hard or how much you want to stop, you have to start over and kind of rewire your brain, because it's so used to accepting these chemicals that I think that dual diagnosis programs, meaning dual diagnosis, it could be alcohol, could be depression, could be bipolar, could be cocaine. It's and there's certain diagnoses that go with certain drugs. But you always have to remember that alcohol is a depressant. Mm-hmm. So if you're depressed and you're drinking and you're taking, let's say, a mild antidepressant, it negates it, because you're just sinking in deeper and deeper. You're drinking.
People are so used to being that way, they don't know there's another way until it gets removed, to go through that hallway to say, oh, I don't have to be that depressed, or I don't have to drink all that.
There is a solution to my problem.
Then you've also got the periodic, which is a whole show I think we should do about what the periodic's about. They can go days, weeks, months, and all of a sudden, that big cycle.
We can do. They say, you pick up the drink takes a drink, and then the drink takes you. So, periodic is a very tough diagnosis, but it's very real.
Yeah, we'll talk about that in another show. It's almost time to wrap up. We've only got a few more minutes. So this is a weekly show called Recovery Wednesday. I'm Dr. Linda Salvin. I'm a psychic healer, a medium. I've been on radio for 30 years as a talk show host, and you can Google me as well as Googling Candy Finnegan and see our pages and see our references and see our numbers and see how we can work with you. And feel free to email either one of us, and it's all secret or private. It's not going to be on the air. You're not going to be exposed. We have our own practices, and we work with each person individually. Of course, there's a fee, because that's how we survive. And it's not like you have a gift from God. And I said, well, so did John Lennon. Everybody gets paid, people. This is our work. We chose to help people. What were you going to say, Ken?
I was just going to say, there's help. You and I represent hope and
faith, courage,
and courage. And we believe there's a new way of living, no matter how old you are or no matter what you've gone through. It can become the past, and we don't shut the door on it, but we don't have to live in it.
That's true. There's always a new opportunity. We're going to close the show, so we're going to see the outro now, folks. Again, I'm Dr. Linda Salvin. You're looking at Candy Finnegan and me every Wednesday right here on Recovery Wednesday, or download us on all the podcasts, or rewatch it on the YouTube, wherever you find us. But please come back, join the chat, start asking questions, and we'll be here for you. And if you have a story that relates to our topics, then email me, and we can bring you on the show, and you can share your position and your perspective to help the next person as well. Until next time, thank you so much for joining us. This is Dr. Linda and Candy Finnegan saying see you soon. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
Thanks for joining us. We hope you enjoyed Recovery Wednesday. You can reach Dr. Linda at 888-509-1077 or at lindasalvin.com, and Candy Finnegan at candyfinnegan@aol.com. Need a breakthrough of your own? Ready for answers or insights nobody else has? Reserve your own one-on-one in-person chat. Dr. Linda isn't just for other people. Dr. Linda gets results for you. And it's easy. Contact details are on screen now. Just click on lindasalvin.com or call toll-free 888-509-1077. That's lindasalvin.com or toll-free at 888-509-1077.